Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches, Pesachim, Daf Daled. We're starting on the very bottom. We're starting toward the bottom on Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. Let's see where we are. We're about 6 lines from the bottom, 3 lines before the lines get very wide at Amar Rabbi Bar Chana. And as we've been doing over the last many blad, we've been learning some lines of Chachamim, some collections of their Torah, and here as well, we'll see a smattering of Torah that was taught by the following Amora. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, in the name of Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Marta, Amar Rav, Mishum Rabbi Yossi Ish Hutzal, all said in the name of Rabbi Yossi Ish Hutzal, a few things. Number 1, Minayin She'ein Shoalim Bekaldim, Machlokas Rashi and the Rashbam. Is this talking about the Isser of Ov V'Yidoni, or is this talking about people who were astrologers? So the Rashbam doesn't like Rashi's pshat to say that it's about Ov. That's Mefurish Pasuk in Chumash. So that can't be what this is talking about. He's got to be talking about astrology, which is not black on white in the Chumash. And the Chaldean were also a group of people, by the way. The Chaldean, people who speak Chaldean. There's a Chaldean church a few miles away from here. I think in Skokie off of Dempster. I think there's a Chaldean church. That's what it says on the side. So they were a group of people. They spoke Aramaic. In fact, many years ago, there was a Rav who was teaching us, when I was a Rebbe in Hillel Torah, teaching us about a curriculum. And he met someone at a counter, and she said that she was Chaldean. And he responded like this, Ana Chaldeana Ana. He responded in full Aramaic, and she totally understood him, which is like our parlance. But this is not referencing the people. It's referencing astrologers. How do we know that that's Asher Shenemar? As the pasuk says, Tamim Tiyam Hashem Elokecha, that one should be complete with a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Big machlokes in the Monei HaMitzvos. Is this counted, the pasuk of Tamim Tiyah? Is it counted as one of the mitzvos? Is it just Ovi Idoni? Big discussions. Next, last of the middle width lines, Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. How do you know that if you have a friend who's greater than you, even in one area, which is basically everybody, right? Because nobody has the perfect profile. So that each of you have levels of excellence that I don't have and vice versa. So therefore, how do you know that there's supposed to be a level of kavod, to linhog bo kavod, shene'emar, as the pasuk writes? The pasuk writes in Daniel, I'm not even going to try to do it without looking, but the pasuk here says, Kol kavel di ruach yatira bei umalka asis lahakamuse al kol malchusa. Basically, Daniel was asked to be the viceroy because he had a pikchus that the people in charge didn't have. So they hired him to do the job. So that's what's going on in this pasuk. And the last thing that Rabbi Bar Chana says, 3 lines from the bottom, V'hayosheves al dam tahor asur l'shamesh. We know back in the times of the Beis Hamikdash that when a woman gave birth, let's just use the example of a boy. The numbers just double for a woman, for a girl. But if a boy is born, the woman is tmeah for 7 days. And then the next 33 days, any dam that she sees at that time is referred to in halacha as dam tohar, mida oraisa. There's no isser of tashmish hamita. She's not a nida. It's dam tohar. It's not dam nida. So the halacha is mida oraisa. Mida oraisa. It's not lemaisa. Mida oraisa. Dam tohar. It's mutter for tashmish hamita. So what is he saying here? What he's saying here, v'hayosheves al dam tahor, that if a woman was Yosheves al Dam Tahor days, it's days 8 for 33 days, starting at day 8 after a boy is born. Asura l'shamish. There's an Isser Derabanan after that period of time to have Tashmish Hamita. We want to make sure that we distinguish between Dam Tahor and Dam Nida. So we say that she's really, they should not have Tashmish Hamita. So says the Gemara, Ad Kama, was this forever? This rabbinic injunction that they shouldn't be intimate. So how does that work out? So the Gemara answers in the name of Rav, Amar Rav, Ona. We're talking about one period of time. What is one period of time? Machlokas Rashi Rashbam. Do we say that it's one Ona 12 hours? Do we say it's 24 hours? This is reminiscent of the concept of the Chumrah of the Or Zarua, that when we keep vestos, when a woman has a relatively normal cycle, and we know when we approximate that she will again become a nida. So we're careful on those 3 days. The chumrah of the or zarua is that an ona, it should be 24 hours and not just 12 hours. Either way, machlokas here, but nevertheless, this isser doesn't apply. This isser doesn't apply. On the night that a woman goes to the mikvah after she has a baby, let's say many weeks later, the couple's mutter to be mashamish. Afal pi that there's a dam tohar concern, we're not even concerned about that anymore because we're not mishamish, we're not boal al dam tohar. So because there's no tashma shemita by dam tohar, this din of Instead of the Gemara doesn't apply to us. 3 lines from the bottom. Tana, about this person who we were just talking about. Who Yosef Ish Hutzal, yes, that was his name. He's as well called Who Yosef Habavli, and as well he's called Who Isi ben Gur Aryeh, Who Isi ben Yehuda. All of these are the same people. Who Isi ben Gamliel, Who Isi ben Mahalalel. This person has a lot of stage names. Uma Shemo, what's his real name? Isi ben Akavia Shemo. Okay, very good. Another person whose names were similar in a lot of places. Who Rav Yitzchak bar Tavla, who Rav Yitzchak ben Chakla, who Rav Yitzchak ben Ilah, who all of them are the same. So then says the Gemara on the top of Kuf Yudalid, Rav Yitzchak ben Acha who Rav Yitzchak ben Acha de Shmaisa, who Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas de Agadata. When we see a Stam Rav Yitzchak in a halachic Gemara, in a Shmaitza, that's Shev Shmaitza. The Shev Shmaitza doesn't write in Ashkafa. The Shev Shmaitza writes in halacha. So the word Shmaitza is a reference to a halachic sugya. So Rav Yitzchak ben Acha the Shmaitza, that is Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas. And if it's a Stam Rav Yitzchak in an Agadata, sorry, I said that wrong. Rav Yitzchak ben Acha is the Shmaitza, and Rav Yitzchak ben Pinchas is for Agadata. The Simanech, how do you know which one is which? So it says the Gemara, Shimu Na'achai. So the word Shimu from Shmaitza, and on the top line is Rav Acha. So Acha and Shmaitza, Shimu Achai. That's how we can remember which Gemara is which. Line 3 of Kuf Yud Dalid Amud Aleph. Amar Rabba Bar Chan, Amar Rav Yochanan Mishmid Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi. Echol batzal v'shev betzel. Eat onions and sit in the shade. And don't eat the expensive foods so that your heart is constantly chasing alayich. So your heart is constantly chasing these foods. Basically, eat simple and you'll be happier. Because if you're constantly only willing to eat the best food in the market, it's not gonna be good for you. Pachos you should minimize the amount of food and drink that you eat. V'tosif al dirascha, make your home more beautiful. The Ben Yoyada here writes that this is referring to one's wife. Beischa, it's a reference to one's spouse, and to make sure that stop spending so much money on the klinikite, spend money on the things that are meaningful, spend money on your wife. He has a couple of other answers as well. 6 lines down, Kuf Yadal Amar Aleph. Kiyasa Ula Amar, Masla Maslinan b'ma'arava. Taf and Shin are interchangeable in Aramaic, Mashla Mashlinan. There's a mashal that they used to use in Ma'arava in the west in Eretz Yisrael. To achil alisa, tashi be'alisa. If you're going to eat the alisa with an aleph, the fatty part of the animal, the tail, the very expensive part, tashi be'alisa, you may as well hide in the attic, because everyone who wants a shekel is going to knock on your door. They're going to try to find you. To achil kikule, but if you were to just eat vegetables, then akikli demata shachim. You could be out in public where they keep the garbage cans, where like you're all on no one's going to say hello to you, no one's going to say boo to you, no one's going to knock on your door. Keep things simple. Mishnah, 1/3 of the way down, Kuf Yadalad. We're getting very close, both on the calendar and in the daf. We're getting very close to the halachic sugyas of the Pesach Seder. Mazgu lokos rishon. Once the first cup of wine is poured, look at the language. Mazgu lo. They were mosaic for him. They prepared a cup for him. What's going on here? This is, of course, the minhag that we have, that we don't pour cups for ourselves. Other people pour cups for us. So mazgu lokos rishon, then there's a big machlokes in the Tanaim. Beishamai was of the opinion that first you're mevarach al hayom mekadesh Yisrael ve'azmanim, whatever the bracha is, ve'achar kach mevarach al hayayin, and then you say borei pri hagafen. That's not how we paskin. We paskin like Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel omrim mevarach al hayayin ve'achar kach mevarach al hayom. That one can be mevarech on wine, and then you say borei pri hagafen, and then you get into asher bachar banu mikolam v'ramamanu mikol Hashem. That's bracha number 2, and that's how we pass in halacha lamaisa. We'll see by the next Mishnah, just 15 lines away, how this halacha developed. Though we know that we do paskin like Beis Hillel, as we always do, but let's dig into some of the svaras lakanu lakan as to how Beis Shammai got to his shita and how Beis Hillel got to his Tanu Rabbanan. We learned this Gemara a while back. Was it in this Masechta? It says here, Gimel is in Brachos. That's a long time ago. It says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in a brisa, Dvarim shebein Beis Shammai Beis Hillel besuda. There are a lot of halachic differences between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel in a meal. Beis Shammai mevarach al yom v'achar kach mevarach al hayayin, like we just saw in our Mishnah. Why does Beis Shammai say that you're mevarach on the yom? He says first, Asher bachar banu mikolam baruch atah Hashem mekadesh azmanim, and then he concludes with baruch atah Hashem l'kenim l'cholam brei pri hagafen. Why does he do that? Says the Gemara, mipnei shehayom gorem layayin sheyavo. The fact that it's yontif is what creates the need to say kiddush. And because of that, you should say the Kiddush Hayom before you say Borei Pri Hagafen. Says the Yom is Gorim for the Yayin, so you should say the Yom first. So Kiddush Hayom, and the day became holy without you. The Adayin Yayin Lo Ba, and the wine has yet to come. This is actually split up as considered two reasons. Reason number one is that let me just parse it out here. He says, "Mevarach mipnei shehayom gorem layayin sheyavo." That's number one, and number two, v'kvar kidesh hayom v'adayin yayin lo ba. The day happens whether or not there's wine. So these are two answers, and it's important that these are two answers, as we'll see in the flow of the Gemara. Halfway down, Kuf Yudal Amarav, the Gemara continues with the Shita Beis Hillel. Ubeis Hillel Amar mevarach alayin v'achar kach mevarach alayom. That's the halacha that we say. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher baruch haba mikol am v'chulei. So that's our halacha. As you can see, the Rambam has his notation here. He didn't put it there, but the Rambam's notation is on this word. Why does he say that? Number one, we don't make Kiddush without wine. So when you bring a bottle of wine to the table, that's when you make Kiddush. So that's what the Gemara means when it says that it's Gorim L'Kiddush Shetei Amer, that the wine causes for Kiddush to be said, Davar Acher. Then Beis Hillel presents a second answer as to why we say Borei Pri Hagafen before we say Kiddush Hayom. Davar Acher, Birkas Hayayin Tadira, Ubirkas Hayom Eina Tadira. Tadir v'she'eino tadir, tadir kodem. Famous halacha that we know from Maseches Brachos, where we first learned it in Shas, that when you have two things that are being weighed against one another and you don't know which one to do first, so the halacha is tadir v'she'eino tadir. You have that which is a consistent and that which is less consistent. We always do the consistent one first. The daily example is talis and tefillin. We wear a talis 7 days a week, or a tefillin 6 days a week. So therefore, because of that, we put the talis first. However, the kedusha of the tefillin is better. We've discussed this before. So in your talis bag, the tefillin should be in the back of the bag because it needs to come out second. However, it needs to be above the talis because it has more kedusha. So we have to be careful about that in our talis. This is halach of tadir she'eino tadir kodem, that the reason why, says Beis Hillel, the reason why we say Borei Pri Hagafen first is because every time you have a cup of wine, you say Borei Pri Hagafen. How often do you have Mikadesh Yisrael V'Azman? You have Kiddush Hayom. It only applies on Yontif. It only applies on Friday nights. It's way less common than cups of wine that we drink. And therefore, because of these two reasons, one should do like Beis Hillel and have yayin, let's say the bracha and yayin first, ve'achar kach mevarech al hayom.
So the Beis Hillel people drink more than Beis Shammai people.
Oh, is that true?
I'm just guessing.
Oh no, it's not. I don't think so. I just think that I think the svaras of Beis Shammai were different.
You can drink wine. People probably drink wine every day, which only Kiddush on Shabbos.
Right, exactly. That was my understanding of the tadir v'she'eino tadir. Not that they drink more by volume, but they make the bracha Borei Pri Hagafen more often than the bracha Mekadesh Yisrael V'Azmanim. That's what I thought. Could be. I've never looked. Could be. That's just my assumption. What?
I'm just guessing myself. Not
Yeah. Don't know. 2/3 of the way down, Kuf Yadal Rav says the Gemara, the Hilchas Hakedibre Beis Hillel. Thank you very much. An obvious statement. We know that the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So ask the Gemara two questions. First of all, my davar acher. Why did you need to give two svaras, Hillel? Why? We were fine with your first one. You said that the yayin is going for the kiddush. Leave it alone. We're done. And we paskin like you anyways. Why did you have to give two answers? We're done. So it says the Gemara, because if you wanted to say maybe hasam tarte v'hachachada, maybe you'd say hasam over there by Beis Shammai. He gave two answers. He gave tarte. The hacha, you Beis Hillel only gave one. So maybe we should paskin like Beis Shammai because they give two. He gave two svaras and you only gave one. It says Gemara, hachanami tarte ninu. That really we have a second one. What's the second one? Tadir v'she'eino tadir kodem. That really Beis Hillel has two answers. That it's yayin is going for kiddush and tadir v'she'eino tadir kodem. And now they're on level playing field. Two svaras each. Two svaras as to why Beis Shammai says that the Kiddush Hayom comes first and then Borei Pri Hagafen, and two svaras as to why Beis Hillel holds that Borei Pri Hagafen comes first and then Kiddush Hayom, and then we paskin in general, like we always do, that the halacha is like Beis Hillel. And on that the Gemara says, halacha kedibri Beis Hillel pshita. Everybody knows that. Says the Gemara, dehanafik baskol. Everybody knows there was a baskol that says that the halacha is like Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara, a couple of answers. If you want to say Kodem Baskol, one answer is that, but maybe this statement of that the halacha is like Beis Hillel in this brisa that we saw from Maseches Brachos, maybe that brisa was written before the Baskol, and we didn't know yet that we passing like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara is telling us in a brisa that we're passing like Beis Hillel. If you want to say really it's la'achar Baskol, Rabbi Yeshua Damrein Mashgichin beBaskol, a well-known story that the two people were arguing, and if I'm right, you'll see that the water will switch directions in the river. You'll see that there will be a Baskol. Ein Mashgichin beBaskol. Ein mashgichin bebaskol, that we don't listen to a baskol. We follow the halachic process, and we don't listen to things that are supernatural. If there was some miraculous scenario when a Rav says a certain psak, all of a sudden it gets cloudy. You don't change your psak because it got cloudy, right? There's no baskols. We don't listen to baskols even if we were to hear them. Next Mishnah. Mishnah says, Heviu lefana, very vague words. And if you look at Rashi on the top of the page, 10 lines down or so, the first one on this Mishnah, it says, there's two masnisans in the Rashi. This one's a little bit, the second one down. So, Heviu lefanav yerakos. They bring vegetables in front of him. And then it says, Mitabel bechazeres, you keep taking those vegetables and you keep dipping them ad shemagi leparperes hapas, until you get to that which precedes the bread, which is maror. So you have karpas and maror, both of which are vegetables, both of which for which we could eat romaine lettuce. So we seem to have two things. The Gemara is going to deal. Why do we have two things? Okay. And then Heviu lefanav matzah vechazeres vecharoses ushnei tavshilin. And then after the maror, after the vegetables, and what are you going to do? You're going to bring out matzah, you're going to bring out chazeres, which is the maror, you're going to bring out charoses, which we know there's a Rashbam here that explains all of this, that this is some of the food from, I think he says it's from Gan Eden. Is that what he says? I can't remember what he said. Let me just look it up. Maybe it wasn't here. Anyways, all of the ingredients of which we know, there's apples and there's nuts and there's wine, whatever it is. Ushnei tavshilin, two types of food, which we'll see in the Gemara what those are. And afal pisha in charoses mitzvah. That's true, even though the charoses itself is not a mitzvah. So it says in the next ton in the Mishnah, the second line from the bottom of the page, Kuf Yudal Amud Aleph, Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok Omer mitzvah. In fact, it is a mitzvah to have the charoses. Who knew? I love it. Eat it by the spoonful. That's amazing food. That tastes very good. If you make it the right way. Uva mikdash ha'mevin lefan of gufo shel Pesach, and of course, that we should be able to have the Korban Pesach itself. But of course, that was obviously that was the best part of the meal, right? We knew we even brought a special Korban Chagiga on Yud Daled, not even Yontiv yet. We brought a special Korban Chagiga to make sure that we were Nechal ala Sova, to make sure that one was going to be eating the food properly. So on the top of Kuf Yud Daled and Beis, we get into a very important halachic sugya, prevalent, relevant to today. Amar Reish Lakish. Zosomeres, it seems from the pashtus of our Mishnah, says Reish Lakish, that mitzvos tzrichos kavana. Why does it seem from our Mishnah that mitzvos tzrichos kavana? What does one thing have to do with the other? We weren't talking about that at all. So the reason why the Gemara says is as follows: Kevan de lo be'iden chiyuva de maror hu de achile bebore priha adama. The first part of the Mishnah that says Heviu lefanav. They gave him vegetables, and he said you have to dip it until the parperes hapas. They gave him lettuce, and he was eating it. And at that time, what bracha did he make? Bore priha adama. No asher kiddushan b'mitzvah savet tzivanu al achilas maror. Nothing at all. He was just eating vegetables. Hu da'achile v'dilma lo ichvan lemaror hilkach boy lemahader la'adbule l'shem maror. And the fact is that by the first time he ate it, maybe he didn't have in mind, and therefore he has to repeat it. But Haraya says Reish Lakish that it must be that it's mitzvos tzrichos kavana. The sal kadaitach mitzvah lo boya kavana. If you're going to tell me that mitzvos don't need kavana, well, then good. You didn't have kavana, so you should be yotzei. What's the big deal? Lama lach trei tibule v'atavi lechad zimna. Great question. So this is why some of the poskim point out that when it comes to Sfiras HaOmer, you're not allowed to say, when somebody asks you, what night is it? And you haven't counted yet, we always answer, last night was X. Because if you say tonight is X, even if you have negative kavanah, some of the poskim say, even if you say, in my brain, I'm not trying to fulfill a mitzvah, tonight is the 8th night of the Omer. So the poskim say, you're done. Why? Because the Magen Avraham on Shulchan Aruch paskins as follows. When it comes to mitzvos deoraisa, the halacha is that mitzvos tzrichos kavana. The halacha is that when you put on your tefillin, you have to have something in your head that says, I'm performing a mitzvah saseh shel Torah. But by dine derabanan, writes the Magen Avraham, he writes that you don't need kavana to do a mitzvah when it's a din derabanan. And according to many Rishonim, Sfiras HaOmer today, because there's no Korban Omer, Sfiras HaOmer today is the din derabanan. So even if you casually respond, and you can even say aloud, I don't want to be yotzei tonight's 8th night of the Omer. You're yotzei because by dine derabanan, we paskin that mitzvos lo tzrichos kavana. So this is the question that it's not really a question. It's what Reish Lakish assumes in our Gemara. So asks the Gemara 6 lines down, Mimai, how do you know that that's true? How did you learn from our Mishnah that mitzvos tzrichos kavana? Dilmal ola mitzvos ain't tzrichos kavana. Really, maybe the case is that mitzvos are not tzarich kavana. Maybe that's possible. Udeka amris trei tibule lamali. Why then did we have 2 cases of someone eating lettuce in our Mishnah? 2 cases of someone eating chazeres? Answers the Gemara. Beautiful. so that the children will ask questions. Says the Gemara, and if you want to say im kain, if that's true, l'shmoin and shiur yerakos. Why doesn't the Mishnah then say it's different vegetables? He's trying to get the kids to ask questions. Yashmin and shiur yerakos. The reason why the Mishnah wrote the same vegetable twice is because had it been that you wrote in the Reisha of the Mishnah, eat carrots, and in the end of the Mishnah it says to eat romaine lettuce, then says the Gemara, Yashmin and shiur yerakos have amina heichadika shiur yerakos hu deba'inan trei tibule. I might have thought that if the beginning of the Mishnah was one type of vegetable and the end of the Mishnah was another type of vegetable, so then that's where I would have assumed deba'inan trei tibule that you have to do the dipping twice. Aval chazeres lechuda lo bai trei tibule kamash malan. I might have thought that if they were both the same food, so therefore I might have been concerned that you would not have to do shtei tibule kamash malan, that's not true. So this is one kasha against Reish Lakish, which is that I have a very plausible explanation for our Mishnah. Both of them are chazeres, and the whole goal of our Mishnah, the reason why we do this twice, why we eat this food twice in a row, the chazeres, is to make sure that the kids are paying attention. We do things that are weird at the Seder all the time. We throw frogs across the table. We take, red food dye and we drip it in the water to make it look like. But we do a lot of things that are strange. We saw the Gemara a number of blot ago. The Rabbi Akiva, the Klayos and the Egozim, Shelo Yishnu, that the kids shouldn't fall asleep, Yishalu, and that they should ask questions. So we're doing good. Reish Lakish, why did you assume that our Mishnah was trying to teach us the mitzvah strichos kavana? Maybe you're wrong. Maybe the reason why our Mishnah says that you have to eat chazeres twice is to remind us that the kids need to be engaged. The Odin, furthermore, Reish Lakish, Tanya, we have a brisa that writes as follows: Achlan demai yatsa, achlan below miskavein yatsa. Mefurash brisa. The brisa says that if you don't have kavana, you're yotze. Finishes up the brisa. Achlan lechatzayin yatsa b'vad shelo yisheh ben achila lechaver te yoser michdei achilas pras. And as well, if you only eat a portion of it, this is a side din as it relates to us, that if you only eat a portion of it, so then the halacha is that you're yotza with that too, provided that shelo yehei. Shelo Yisha, that there wasn't a very long time in your two achilas, you'll still be yotzei the halacha of maror. So says the Gemara, these two kashas are a very big problem for Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish tried to infer from our Mishnah mitzvah strichos kavana. We have two kashas on it. Answers the Gemara, Tanoihi. Really, it's a machlokes tanaim. Namely, Reish Lakish is of the opinion that mitzvah strichos kavana, and there are some tanaim to back him up. And the other parts of the Gemara that were arguing against Reish Lakish hold mitzvahs lo tzrichos kavana, and they have Mishnayos to back themselves up as well. The Tanya, the Brisa writes halfway down, Kuf Yadal Amud Beis. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Af al pi shetibel bechazeres mitzvah lahavi lefanav chazeres v'charosas u'shnei tavshilin. This is what the Brisa writes in the name of Rabbi Yossi, a Tana. What does Rabbi Yossi write? Afal pisha tibel b'chazeres, our Mishnah. Even though you started out our Mishnah by eating chazeres, you already ate it once. Mitzvah lahavi lefanav chazeres v'charos. It's still another mitzvah to bring it out again. You were not yotzei maror yet. You have to bring it out again. And charoses and shnei tavshilin. Says the Gemara. Well, but still, that Brisa is not a proof that there's a Tana that Reish Lakish is following that says mitzvah strichos kavana. The Akati still, Mimai, how do you know that what you're saying is true, that there's a Tana that is behind the sheet of Reish Lakish? Dilma kasava Rabbi Yossi, maybe this Rabbi Yossi who says that there's a mitzvah to bring out the chazeres again, maybe really he holds ein strichos kavana. Reish Lakish has no support in the Tanaim. The high deboina trei tibule keicha tetavia ker letinokos. Maybe it's the case that Brisa also, that Rabbi Yossi was also talking about the kids, and you cannot learn mitzvah strichos kavana. And then we're back to our question that we started with Reish Lakish. How do you get to your opinion mitzvah strichos kavana? Even Rabbi Yossi could be explained as holding mitzvahs ein strichos kavana. So then answers the Gemara, the dagger. In Cain, my mitzvah. If you look at the language of the Brisa of Rabbi Yossi, what does it say? It says first that they ate that food, and then it says we bring it back for the sake of mitzvah. So that's not for the kids. That's not for the kids. Engaging the kids is not the mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to say the Haggadah to the kids. Yes, that's one of the most unique mitzvahs that say Shel Torah, Monia mitzvahs. I think the Sefer Achinu he definitely quotes it. I think it's in mitzvah Tesvav. It's pretty early on in the Sefer Achinu. He speaks about the mitzvahs I say to be misaper, about the shvachim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Fine, but nevertheless, this is a very good answer. And therefore, what do we see from here? We see the Taka is true. Reish Lakish has a Mari Makom, and his inference from our Mishnah is correct. And his inference from our Mishnah is that it is possible that our Mishnah holds that mitzvah strichos kavana, halacha lemaisa, mitzvah strichos kavana is a machlokas in the Tanaim. It's a machlokas in the Amoraim. It's a machlokas in the Rishonim. And as mentioned, the way that it plays out in halacha, the way that we paskin ladin is that when we do a mitzvah doraisa, we are supposed to have kavana. And in fact, if you put on tefillin and you had no clue what you were doing, l'chora, you're not yotzei. L'chora, you would not be yotze because mitzvah is richos kavan on a din d'oraisa level. But when it comes to dinei derabanan, so the halacha is that you are still yotze. Says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. My shnei tavshilin. We saw in our Mishnah, we saw in the Brisa as well of Rabbi Yossi. It makes a reference to two foods. What two foods were they? This sounds exciting. Well, not the first one. I don't like beets. But Amar Rav Huna, silka va'aroza, beets and rice. Rice. We saw the shita earlier in Shas that rice could actually be one of the possibilities for matzah, according to one sheet on the Tanakh. We'll speak about that shortly. So that's what Rav Huna says. And then Rava have a mahadra silka va'aroza hol v'nafik b'pumin de Rav Huna. The second that he heard Rav Huna say that, he went shopping. I'm going to buy beets. I'm going to make myself a dish. And I'm going to buy rice. And I'm going to make myself a dish. And it's going to be on my Pesach table. Amar Rav Ashi. What do we see from here? Shma mina. It must be de Rav Huna. Rav Huna, who says that you're supposed to have silka va'aroza, that you're supposed to actually have rice as one of the meals on your table. It must be leis techayish laha de Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. It must be that he ignores the sheets of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. How so? The Tanya, because the Brisa writes. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer, 10 lines from the bottom, Kuf Yadalim and Beis. What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say? Orez min daganhu v'chayaven al chimutz al kares v'adam yotze bo yidei chavasa b'pesach. Wow. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is of the opinion you can use rice flour to make matzah, and you could be yotze the mitzvah sasei shel Torah eating matzah. And on the flip side, if you let that flour sit with water and leaven for 18 minutes and you eat it, you're chayiv kares because you made chametz. It's like flour. It's the same thing. There's no difference. That was Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So says the Gemara, it's Pashut Pshat, that Rav Huna, who says that he holds that you're allowed to have one of the shnei tavshilin is rice, so he holds that he holds that you're allowed to bring it to the Pesach table. So obviously, says the Gemara, he must not hold of the shita of Rav Yochanan ben Nuri. We'll stop right here. We're going to pick up tomorrow night from Chizkiah, 8-9 lines from the bottom of Kuf Yadalim and Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.